Question for you, my friends. Do any of you have a nickname? Or if you don't have a nickname, what would you like your nickname to be? What's yours, Lily?
My actual name is Leanne and my nickname's Lily.
Your actual name is Leanne and your nickname is Lily. Oh, what?
His real name my real name is Joseph, but my nickname is Joey.
Your real name is Joseph, but your nickname is Joey.
They call me my Joey.
Okay, that's very good. Do any of you others have nicknames? Or if you don't, what would you like your nickname to be? I'll call you it, if it's appropriate. Okay, yes? What? Some people call you Matt, short for Matthew. What about you, Katie? Oh, your full name is Catherine, and people call you Katie for short? Yeah? What's your full name? Your full name is Beatrice, and we call you Bee? Yes, that's great. Well, if you think of a nickname that you want me to call you, I will. So when I was a kid, my nickname was Sunny because I like to smile. There, maybe like you have nicknames, some of them it was your shorter name because your name is long and people who know you well and love you well call you the short name. Or maybe sometimes nicknames are because you do something or you say something or you act a certain way. Oh, some people at school call you the math master. Is that because you're really good at math? They could call you the Matt master because your name is Matthew. Okay, no. Okay, well, anyway, so that's because you do math really well. In the first reading today, God gives Abram and Sarai a new name. He gives them the name Abraham and Sarah because he's going to give them a promise, and their names tell others what God will do for them. That Abraham is going to be the father of many, many nations. That's why he's named Abraham. And Sarai is now called Sarah because she is God's princess. That's a cool name. So God changes their name to tell them what he will do for them. God knows your name as he named you, and he promises to do this for you. He promises to give you all that you need. He promises to care for you and when you're sad or when you're angry or when you're hurt, to be there for you. He promises that you will live forever with him, and until then, he's always with you. So I think that God knows your real names and your nicknames and loves you just as you are. So let us pray. Dear God, thank you for knowing our names and loving us just as we are and wanting us to be our real self. Help us to make you proud. Amen. You may go to activity time or back to your places of worship. It's very difficult to be ashamed of those whom you love. So difficult, in fact, that shame is one of those unspeakable emotions. Someone or others might be able to tell that something is wrong between you, but you can't tell them that what's wrong is you're ashamed of them without making them feel ashamed. And so, shame becomes this unspeakable feeling, something that we keep a secret, hidden. But Jesus does the opposite. In today's gospel, he exposes Peter's shame and our own. Peter rebuked Jesus after Jesus had said that the Son of Man would be rejected by the chief priests, the elders, and the scribes, suffer death, and then be raised after 3 days. And after hearing this, not wanting to make Jesus feel ashamed, Peter takes Jesus over to the side, off away from everyone else, and rebukes him and says, "Don't say that anymore." Now, There are a number of reasons why Peter could do that. First of all, like that word rebuke is also censor. So like Peter is trying to censor Jesus. He's trying to make him quiet, to shut him up, cut out the parts of Jesus' speech that Peter doesn't like. So here are some possibilities for what Peter didn't like. Perhaps he was worried that if Jesus spoke so openly about against the scribes and the chief priests and the elders, that they would put Jesus to death. That's kind of the point Jesus is saying. Now, another possibility is that that Peter is trying to censor Jesus because he thinks that others won't like what Jesus is saying, and Jesus will lose followers, and they'll lose some of their momentum. Or perhaps Peter wants to censor Jesus because of the death part itself, that he doesn't want Jesus to die. That the Son of Man would suffer and die is precisely the point that Jesus needs to emphasize, because for many first century Jews, the Messiah was a powerful, glorious figure, not a suffering one who would die or die to capital punishment as a criminal. Whatever the reason, Peter does not think Jesus should speak so openly, but hide this and stop saying it. Whatever the reason, he thinks that it's Jesus' plan to suffer and die does not align with Peter's plans for Jesus, with Peter's plans for the movement, and with Peter's vision and hopes. If Peter did not feel ashamed as soon as he began to speak, and if he did not feel ashamed when Jesus turns to the other disciples and takes this private powwow into a public lesson for all the disciples, if he didn't feel ashamed then you can bet that Peter felt ashamed when Jesus called him Satan. I speak from experience. When I was in 8th grade, my family moved from Iowa to Minnesota. We moved right in the middle of the 8th grade year, and it was really difficult for me. I had a good group of friends, and I guess it's true for adults. Also, when you're in junior high, life is all about your friends. And so to be separated from them was really hard. My parents did what they could. That was before Facebook or before teens had cell phones. I didn't even know instant messenger. So my parents were gracious and allowed us to have many long distance phone calls. And then for my birthday, we drove down and met my friends halfway, and they got to come for a birthday weekend, a weekend-long slumber party. It was good. Now, my friends had this impression that my move was very glamorous, and we lived very glamorously, because they were from Iowa, from the farm, and lived in the houses in which they had spent their whole lives, and I was moving to Minneapolis, St. Paul, with such grand things as the Mall of America, and other such things. So, I wanted them to think that I had a glamorous life, so I devised a brilliant plan. That when on the way back, when I coughed in the back seat, my mom was supposed to drive into the driveway of that house, the nearest house. On the way, I saw this mansion when we were driving back, and so I coughed awkwardly. And so my mom turned off into this mansion house, and I said, "Okay, we're here." And my friends were like, "Great, let's go." And then I said, "Okay, well, actually, this isn't my house, and we still have half an hour more to drive." My plan didn't go as I thought. They didn't think it was funny or cool, and they weren't impressed. They were just annoyed that we still had half an hour in the car. Okay, so that awkward moment aside, the rest of the weekend was great. And in addition to driving the 2.5 hours to pick up my group of friends, my parents also took us shopping and gave us all the pizza we want, and we had late nights, and they tolerated 5 8th graders in the bathroom, the one bathroom. And so they were great. And the weekend culminated with a trip to the Mall of America. And we got to go to the Rainforest Cafe. That was a big deal. I mean, that's the kind where like it mists, it rains from the ceiling, and there's stars, and you hear jungle noises. It's pretty cool. So, as part of this special event, my dad said that we could order whatever we wanted off the menu. And he ordered appetizers, and he said we could have special ice cream drinks. So, at this point, though, I was feeling ashamed of how I had behaved about the house, and I didn't want my friends to think we couldn't be friends anymore, or that life was really glamorous in Minnesota. I wanted them to think like, we are still us, we are still friends. So to redeem myself and win them back, and because I was a little afraid that my parents might come to resent this weekend, and that they were making sacrifices to make this weekend, and that I would have to make sacrifices down the road and have to do without because of the fun of that weekend. So when my dad offered all of those things, I began to say, Dad, that's really expensive. Are you sure you can afford that? Are you like, I don't know that we should do that. How about, okay, one appetizer, but we don't need desserts. After my dad reassured me, but I still kept asking those questions, he said, Emily, can I talk to you for a minute? Uh-oh. So now, he takes me to the gift shop. And he says, Emily, stop talking about money. And you are making that's not how I taught you to be. That's not what Nelsons do. That's not who I raised you to be. I taught you to make people feel loved and wanted and welcome, to be generous. So to use what God has given you to bless others, and you are doing the opposite. You are making them feel unwanted, uncomfortable, ashamed, embarrassed, like they're an inconvenience which we would rather have sent away. And more importantly, you're not being yourself. You feel people's pain and do what you can to love them. You haven't been doing that for your friends this weekend. But it's not too late. They're still here, so there's still time for you to be you. Parents feel ashamed of their children when they aren't who they were raised to be, when they are other than who they know them to be. God is ashamed of us when we are other than who he knows us to be. God is ashamed of us when we are other than who he has made us to be. And when we are other, we reflect badly on him, as I reflect badly on my dad. When we are untrustworthy, when we make other people feel stupid and criticize them, when we promote ourselves to make ourselves look good, when we meet our needs at the expense of others, when we allow evil to go unchecked and say nothing because we are afraid, when we hide ourselves for fear of people actually knowing us and seeing us, well, then we are not who God has made us to be, and we reflect badly on him. I was censoring my dad. Peter was censoring Jesus, and we got rebuked because we needed to be set straight. We needed to be put back on the right path. For what will it profit them if they gain the whole world but lose their life? Life there is not life in the sense of breathing, thinking, or existence. That word for life is psyche, soul, self. What will it profit us if we gain all things worldly, wealth and health and success and power and acceptance and approval, but if we lose ourselves, if we lose who we are? Why do we do that? Why do we risk so much? Why do we lose sight of who we are? Because we have listened to Satan and his lies. Jesus calls Peter Satan because the Satan is the accuser. He tempts people to think of their own interests rather than God. He tempts people to worry and think about humanly things instead of trusting in God's promises and valuing what God values. Peter and I, we're not thinking of God's interests, but of our own. And we needed to be rebuked, to be set back on course, to be set straight. We had given ourselves away. We were seeking wealth and approval and love and acceptance, and that is what we do. We spend all of our time chasing after things that are not God. And so today in this gospel, when Jesus exposes Peter, so too is Jesus exposing us and all the things we have been secretly plotting and hiding and holding within ourselves. Jesus brings open that the truth is we have chased after power, acceptance, approval, love, wealth, respect, success, instead of running to the God who runs to us. Jesus says, anyone who is ashamed of me in this adulterous and sinful generation, I will be ashamed, the Son of Man will be ashamed when he comes in the glory with the Father and the heavenly angels. That verse makes us uncomfortable because it functions as the law. It exposes the truth and how we have failed. That we have committed adultery against God. That we have sold ourselves for pleasure and traded God's love eternal for lust of what is temporal. That's not the end of my story. So, back in the gift shop, after my shame had been exposed, in order to vindicate myself, I began to protest. No, I said all of that because I was defending my dad. My friends didn't appreciate what my mom and dad had done for them this weekend, and they wouldn't realize all that my family had done for them unless I showed it to them. And my dad said, I don't need you to defend me. I'm not doing this because I feel obligated or need to impress or prove anything. I'm not doing this because I have to, but because I want to. I'm doing this because I love you and because I love your friends for loving my daughter so well. A father's love can change everything. It can change how you see him. It can change how you see the world and your purpose in life. It can change how you see yourself. Jesus is not here speaking to us saying, you better not make me shamed or you're out. He's saying, you see my crucifixion, my death, and my resurrection? I didn't do that because I had to, but because I wanted to, because I love you. And I love your friends. And I love your family. And I love those who don't love you. He's saying it to us so that we see who God truly is. So we see ourselves as we truly are. And so we see what we are called to do. To bear the cross. Now, many times when we speak of bearing the cross, we'll say it like, cancer is just my cross to bear. Or that difficult person at work is just my cross to bear. Or that personality trait that I don't really like about myself that makes it difficult with other people, that's just my cross to bear. I gotta practice self-control. We use that cross as if the cross is some kind of suffering that we must endure. But that's a misunderstanding. The crucifixion is not God the Son or God the Father testing God the Son. It's the triune God redeeming the world in love. The cross is not some kind of suffering that we endure against our will. Jesus willingly became human and willingly went to the cross out of love. The cross is not suffering for our own sake. Jesus didn't suffer for himself, but for the world. No, the cross Bearing our cross is willingly entering into the suffering of others, just as Jesus did, in order that God's love might be known. It is an intentional decision to be with others in suffering, that they might know God's love. And so God calls us to bear our cross. In other words, to follow Jesus. And since we are made in the image of God, when we do take our cross, when we do willingly enter into the suffering of others, we are more our true selves than at any other time. As soon as my dad revealed that the reason for his generosity was love, immediately I felt ashamed, and immediately I asked for forgiveness, and immediately he gave it. But it took me a long time to trust it. For weeks after, I would say, "Dad, I'm so sorry that I did that. Are you sure you want to forgive me when I disgraced you, when I embarrassed you, when I was so not who I was supposed to be? Are you sure you want to forgive me?" I didn't believe it until one day he said, "Emily, I said I forgave you because I meant it. Don't hold on to this anymore. From this moment on, trust it, believe it, and be free." That was so much the gospel that I had heard in church that I trusted it. I wonder how many times Peter asked for forgiveness for this incident. I wonder how long it took Peter to trust that he was forgiven and that Jesus was no longer ashamed of him. Did he begin to realize, oh, Jesus does still want me, when he got the special invitation with James and John to join Jesus on the mountain for the transfiguration? Did he begin to believe he had a special place in Jesus' heart when he got to go to the Garden of Gethsemane with Jesus in his last hours? Did he begin to trust? Was he assured of his calling to be a witness when he was one of the first witnesses of the resurrection at the tomb and in the locked room? Or did he finally trust he was forgiven at the Sea of Tiberias, when after fishing, Peter and the disciples see Jesus on the shore? And Peter, who had been naked, puts on clothes and then jumps into the water because he cannot bear to be any more vulnerable, any more exposed to his Lord and Savior than he already is, to this God who knows that he has ashamed him, and even more, he has betrayed him. Was it that moment when he reached the shore and walked out of the water, expecting Jesus, who had now come in his glory, to say, "Peter, I am ashamed of you"? And instead, he hears Jesus say, "Come and have breakfast." I do not know when or if Peter believed that he was forgiven, or how long it took him to trust it. But God would not have you wait that long. God would have you today to lay down your shame, take up your cross, that is your true self, the self who God made you to be, and trust once and for all that you are forgiven.